This is not what I would prefer to do. Everyone's really busy right now with holidays are coming up. We got a couple days till Christmas. It's currently Sunday, and it's jacked up. I had a bunch of people lined up to try to do podcasts with, and everyone's just busy, dude. Everyone's out Christmas shopping. I called one of my buddies, Johnny. He's out Christmas shopping, and no one's got time to record a podcast. We had a pretty traumatic thing happen. Obviously, it didn't really wasn't we, but as a community of people who watch YouTube like I do, and watch the motorsports, the Cletus McFarlands of the world, and that whole clique of friends. It's really probably the most dramatic thing in that industry that I've ever seen. Greg Biffle, December 18th, him and his family wrecked their personal private jet. It sucks. So he was just getting really big on YouTube. I don't know how many subscribers he has now, but I always knew of him. I knew he had a big house in Glamis. He was like racing side by sides, like drag racing side by sides in the dunes. Just always kind of a go getter in that world of motorsports, going fast, racing boats, doing all that stuff. He won a bunch of NASCAR stuff. I wrote a bunch of these facts down just because I almost feel like him passing away is bringing more of a spotlight to him than he already had, even though he's been in, the racing world since the early 90s. I mean, I've seen more posts about, rest in peace to him and, prayers for his daughter that passed away's mom, which is Greg's ex-wife from previous marriage, and just all this stuff. It's just crazy to me that what's coming out about it, so much cool. People are making awesome like montages, and they're kind of like bringing up all the history of it. And so I've studied him quite a bit just because I know that he's a big business guy, and I love like finding out what these guys are doing because, obviously you make a huge bag racing NASCAR, especially when you're winning. So I'm like, he's a pretty responsible guy, I'd imagine. So I started intersecting and looking into what he was doing. Probably like 4 months ago, 5 months ago, when he was really starting to blow up on the YouTube space. And he's got all sorts of stuff going on. He's got, leasing yachts, aircraft, like he lease out his private jet, helicopters. He's got some personal aircraft aviation stuff too. I think all that started when he was racing for the Roush team. They seemed like they were super involved with the Roush. The Roush was super involved with aviation, so I think that's what brought him into it. And then him being into it during the hurricane that affected South Carolina, North Carolina. I think it was this last year in 2024. That's when I first started seeing him because he's using his R44 going into all these all this area that there's no roads to. There's going to be people with no supplies for weeks at a time. And Greg went out there, and then a week or so later, Cletus ended up going out there with his, and they were just like, bringing in supplies, Starlinks, generators, I think whatever they could to keep these families alive. I know they brought some oxygen into some older people, and it was just super cool to see that. And then that's when he really started taking off. That's when his like the big Cletus bet. A lot of people found out about that because I think they were already probably friends or they had some mutual friends and stuff. But the big upbringing for him was him and Cletus had a bet that was like 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and he wouldn't wear sleeves for a month. So it was funny. Like there had a bunch of eyes on him after he ended up getting the 100,000. But like Cletus would go out to like fancy restaurants and find him, and they're like, "Hey, a bet's a bet," and they'd go and rip his sleeves off. And I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but it was super cool to see that. Just like they're like jokesters, it's like you see a lot of these super famous people and celebrities and stuff, and they're just arrogant, and they would never do something like that. Biffle doesn't care. He's out freaking, no sleeves, going to Talladega with the Cletus McFarland guys, and just he was out just being a redneck, doing what keeps it's real. He's not out trying to go eat caviar on a yacht. He might have a yacht and house in Florida on the coast, but he's out doing redneck stuff with his friends, and that's why you got into racing. I'm sure, I'm sure his dad, I've watched some videos and he talked about his dad used to race jet boats and street race and all this stuff. And that's why he was in that scene because of his dad, I'm sure that I know they grew up in like the PNW, like the Pacific Northwest. And then I'm sure obviously racing took him to the Carolinas. It's just cool to see big, huge guys like Greg Biffle was being a real person. If you watched his if you watch his YouTube channel, you'll see he's at Harbor Freight, no security. He's out freaking at restaurants in the Bahamas on vacation all the time. And, he's just like out living his day-to-day life. He's not going to change because money, or he's not going to hide because money or whatever, So that was super cool to me. Let's get into what I wrote down. I mean, there's kind of a lot, and I'm still recording off my phone, so I just grabbed an old receipt from Ace and wrote it down. So Greg Biffle, the Biff. He had a bunch of couple different nicknames, and I was going to write them all down, but it's like just kind of a lot of stuff to read. I went through multiple sites to get all this stuff to make sure it was the most accurate. So Thursday, December 18th is when he passed away. He was on his way to Cletus's for a $10,000 gift exchange. So Cletus made a video on this earlier today. And he basically said he's been looking for a friend who will do this gift exchange with him. So $10,000 the first year, $20,000 the second year, $40,000 the year after that, and just keep doubling it, So I think Cletus said he got him a big RC plane and some miniature donkeys. And that's super funny, like the RC plane, like who would want an RC plane? And the 2 miniature donkeys, just hilarious, just because like it's whatever. And then it talked about in the video how Greg got him some racing pigeons, and that's just kind of funny, like Mike Tyson stuff. The racing pigeons and all that. So when Greg passed away, he was 55. On his second marriage, he was married to Christina. She was 35. He had a daughter who was in the plane when they wrecked, Emma. She was 14, and that was from Greg's previous marriage. And then he had Ryder. He was 5. This is something that really hurt me about it because I have 2 little boys myself, and so Ryder would have been between my 2 boys, and I know Ryder. He's in a lot of the videos with Cletus. Well, like Cletus's son Rip and him were probably buddies, I'd assume. So it sucks that a little kid like that losing his buddy. Then I look like my friends, or like my kids' friends. They're attached to these friends they've only known for a year or something, but that's a fifth of their life. So it's a huge thing. Those little kids, and I like that Greg put his kid in a lot of content where a lot of people I feel like hide him, which is totally a cool, ethical thing to do because people are weird in the world, right? But I like that he put his kid out there, and he took him to the Polaris dealership, and he took him to go ride dirt bikes in the dunes, and he was out ripping sand car with his kid, and it's just sick to see that he got his kid involved because that kid would have been into motorsports, into racing, and he was just following that path of his dad that his dad obviously was one of the kings of, one of the biggest creators in that industry, and not just creator, he's won all this crazy stuff, but it just sucks that Ryder was obviously killed in this plane crash too, and my buddy Kyle, who called me about the wreck happening, we were talking on the phone about it, like getting all teary-eyed. It's like him dying in a plane crash. It's like, dude, he's had his hours in aviation. It just, it's not if you wreck a plane, it's when. It's not if you wreck a helicopter, it's when. It's just like that stuff happens, right? You're in the sky. Like you're never gonna make it out. You're never gonna make it out without a wreck. I mean, if you had a crop duster pilot in here, they've probably all wrecked 2 or 3 of them. It just happens. But the fact that it happened in a private jet with his family, and it took all their lives and the pilots' lives. There were 7. I think they said it was 7 of them in the plane. So it must have been Greg, Christina, Ryder, Emma, and then 2 pilots, and then somebody else, I guess, or I don't know. I didn't actually read that. I don't know who the last person was, but that's the part that killed me was the whole rider thing. Emma, it's just a horrific thing. He worked his butt off day in and day out to provide them a life to be able to ride in private jets. Private jets are a lot more dangerous than standard like massive airlines. They just don't have I would say the teching probably, or the aviation upkeep, and doing your inspections and upkeep and all that stuff on a private jet's nothing compared to like with these big airliners. And that's the flex. He worked his butt off to be able to make enough money to buy a private jet, take them in private jets. That's like people spend tons of money to ride in a private jet one time, and that's just, they were doing it all the time and back and forth and all over the place. And something so horrible happened. These pilots are on payroll. It's like you paid them to do their job, and it actually hasn't came out. I Googled it a bunch. I looked on a bunch of AI stuff to see what they came up with. I don't think they know why the plane went down. I don't know if they called into the tower. It's obviously under investigation, but they said it shouldn't come out for almost a year on what happened to the plane. And if there is stuff, it's probably not true just because it's so new. I mean, I think he wrecked beginning of this week, so it's not super out there. So he raced, I think, like dirt track growing up. He ended up racing the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, which was previously like the Busch Series. He was champions of both of those. He had 19 wins in the Cup Series, which is the Nextel Cup Series. He had a total earning of $58 million. And that is official career earnings. That is an insane amount of money. And, because of that, he was able to start some businesses and do all that. 1998, he was Rookie of the Year. Which is, just the start of his upbringing in the big dog NASCAR racing, and all that. When, I looked into more of him as a businessman, because just the money is so interesting, and like, country music singers, rock stars, NASCAR drivers, creators. It's like some of these guys are sloppy. They're blowed as fast as they can, and then they don't have nothing in the end, And I always just was like, if I ever made it big, somehow made a bunch of money, you got to reinvest it where you can get set up and just go to work and go out and do your thing, but just collect a check, if you have enough investment. So the business side for me, I've always had a heart for to figure out how to not work and be able to go on vacations with my family and do all that stuff. So he was a businessman. He owned GB Aviation, which I'm assuming is Greg Biffle Aviation. And I read a bunch of stuff, and they said it wasn't just a private company. So he would lease out his private jet. He has a couple other Cessnas he leases out. He has a helicopter he leases out, and then he had his private like R-44 that I think he just had for himself. So he had the aviation business. He had a Triple B Stone. It is a rock quarry out of Virginia. From what I read up on it, that was like a failing rock quarry, and he ended up buying it and kind of revamping it and taking over and making that running business again, a profitable business at that. He owned and leased some yachts, which I never took him as a yacht guy, but it said down in Key West, Florida, he had some yachts, and he'll rent them out or lease them out, and then have them for himself. And he actually docked those at his house in Key West that he just recently sold. So I don't know if this stuff's still accurately still in business or what with that is. He's a owner partner on 3 tracks in Oregon, 2 dirt tracks and 1 off-road track. And the dirt tracks are obviously oval tracks. And then the off-road track, I'm not sure exactly if it's like a dirt bike track or if it's like more side-by-side racing or what exactly that is. Pretty interesting. You would never know that stuff. You just looked, watch his YouTube videos. He never talks about business and stuff like that, but he's always got money to buy, marketplace deals. So he had money coming from somewhere. He had, I started looking it up, and I was onto it for like 3 hours. real estate, so much stuff. These investments really showcased Biffle. The man, I don't even know how to. The business accomplishments turning racing success into like an adverse portfolio, industrial operations, aviation, high value real estate. Have you ever seen the background of his house and pictures? I mean, it's sick. I mean, it's on 10 acres. He owns a big ranch. I think it's like 2,000 acres in the south part of North Carolina. I should have wrote it down, but I looked into it and he's got a dirt track there and a bunch of stuff. And it's just super, super cool that, he had all this stuff going on and nobody, he didn't give a crap. He's out driving broke down motorhomes across the country with Cletus and those guys. And, that's what I mean. It's just, he was like a humble, work hard, have fun dude. He was all about having fun. In one of his last videos, he did like a cheap off-road challenge, and it was like a 6-wheeled 3-wheeler, a regular Kawasaki 3-wheeler, a snowmobile, and just, I don't know, just super fun, like a 200X or something. Just super funny. I don't know. It's just hilarious seeing they're just good old boys. They're not, like I said, they're not eating caviar. They're freaking doing redneck stuff, and that's what keeps it cool and keeps it all alive. So he was obviously big in real estate investments and made money. And then his wife, Christina, she was really involved in real estate. She was a dealer. She owned a company called Leisurely Real Estate. It was in North and South Carolina. I'm not sure if that's like a firm or what that is, but I know that when they met was because real estate. I think she helped him purchase a house or something, and that's how they met. I think their 20-year difference never made nothing. If you ever watched their YouTube videos, they just seemed in love, and she was always doing stuff with him. He's dragging her to Harbor Freight and doing all this fun magnet fishing and buying tools and buying just quirky, weird stuff that we're all into. And that was really cool to me to see. Like, he's just a guy, he doesn't give a crap. He's just doing his thing, and that's really, really cool to me that, he would show that side of it. He loves Harbor Freight, cheap tools, and just, being a man. I wrote down he's always in public. We've met some people, we've ran into some celebrities throughout our goings. We ran into Travis Pastrana at a pool party. We've met Blake Wilkie. We've met a bunch of motorsports guys throughout Nitrocross and all that stuff. It's crazy. A lot of those guys are just regular Joes. You don't see them rolling around like Riley Green with a security guard and stuff and doing all that. But the thing about Biffle is crazy. He's out going to South Carolina, North Carolina, these little home podunk tracks that, they're not even selling out the bleachers. And, he's out in the pits freaking hanging out. He had his kid and his wife with him all the time, and they're just out in the pits doing their thing like they're regular people. You wouldn't know that he's, made over 50 million just off NASCAR. He obviously rolls up there, I think, in a brand new platinum dually, but it's like, how sick was that he just out in public, he's at the grocery store signing hats and taking pictures with people. And, I feel like that attitude, he probably wasn't that guy to ever be like, sorry, I don't have time. He's just like appreciative for the people who watch him. And he realized who was watching, and he took that in, and, he was just like a handshake guy, and I feel like that was super cool to watch. Him and Cletus' videos, they're at gas stations and doing all this stuff that you just never expect to see someone of that standard of high money and craziness, but it's super cool that he wasn't ever like too good for the small guys, the guy at the dirt track, hey, come look at this, what would you do, this kind of stuff. And people really let him talk, and that was something that I really respected about him, that people would let him talk and he would talk. He wouldn't be afraid to go, give his advice or his 2 cents here or there, or, just doing small dollar bets at Cletus events and that kind of stuff. And I love that he he just reminds me of one of my buddies back home in California, and just a good old boy. I could imagine he'd be one of those guys like spontaneous trips to Mexico or whatever you wanted to do. He was always just the downest guy, you know. Cletus's video, he talked about how every month for like the last year they've spent time together, and you know they're just always going on Bahamas trips and all this stuff, and just like that reminds me of like my friend group, you know, and that's what obviously I never got to see him or meet him or anything like that, but it reminds me so much of my friend group because we are just a basket case, you know. We're going to Christmas. Last night I went to my 6th Christmas party for this year, so it's like we're just always doing fun stuff. We go in there, you know, white elephant presents and all that stuff, and it you know, you got to keep it fun, right? So we had some super inappropriate white elephant gifts last night. We show up there with no plans in the spring. We walk out of there with a trip to Cabo. We got a plan, and you know we're going to Tampa, Florida now just to go, and it's like all this stuff, and it's like I feel like that friend group would be how we are. You know, I'm sure we would all connect just like best friends. You know, I met like 4 or 5 people at a Christmas party last night, and you know, they're texting me this morning, you know, it was great meeting you. Can't wait to go to this or that, or let's go grab dinner soon. Let's go ride dirt bikes. Let's go do whatever, you know, and we're all super active in that space of wanting to go do stuff. The last real thing I have, I don't know what we're at for time. I can't see my clock, but this tore me up really, really bad. At the end of Cletus's video in his memory for Greg, he basically said how he wants to end his videos from here on out is be like Biff. And when he said that, he cut it out a bunch, but I like started crying because I'm like, you know, I'm on the couch and my wife's next to me. She's like, "What are you doing?" And she was on her phone, not paying attention. I'm like, you guys don't realize like the be like Biff thing at the end of Cletus's videos, he'll probably do it for the rest of his career, you know, because that was his best friend. You know, they were doing all sorts of stuff together, and you know, it's just I think the be like Biff thing was pushing like, you know, being consistent, being a father, being a good friend, calling people back, you know, chase your dreams, work hard every day, don't let anyone drag you down. And all that stuff he stood for, you know, and that's like each time I hear Cletus say that, I might get a little worked up, you know, because it's like I know that the meaning behind that is very deep. Like that was very deep for him to be able to say that. I mean, it took him like 4 or 5 tries to get through the end of the video because he couldn't even talk, you know, his eyes were all bloodshot crying, and that really tore me up, you know, to see a guy who's so happy all the time, you know, he's punching out videos every week, very high quality content and just doing his thing. And when, you know, he was like, you know what, he's like, I'm going to change the ending to all my videos to be like Biff, or how he worded it in like a slang type deal. And it just ended up as like, be like Biff. And, that, man, it makes me think of just all the good people in my community that I get to spend time with. And, you know, I got friends from coast to coast, and they're just people I want to be like, people I want to be friends with. You know, I got guys that run crazy operations, huge construction businesses and all this stuff. And, you know, I always want to be like them, you know? So, you know, maybe someday when that comes, I dedicate a video or my videos to something like to one of my friends, you know. But the fact that, you know, Cletus is doing it is very interesting. And just, man, there's so much to the be like Biff thing, because I know where he's coming from on that, just thinking about it, because like, you know, he was a dad, he was a friend, he was just a good bald eagle, red, white, and blue American. And that's what we need more of in this country. You know, there's so many negative people and just people that are just, man, I don't know. Just there's so much negativity in this world nowadays. It's insane to me. And I don't know. I'm very proud of the friend group I have, and I wouldn't change it for the world. the man, losses suck though. They really, really do. We lost one of my dad's business partners of 25 years this last year, and his name was Brandon. Just a go getter. Show up early, stay late. Nobody's out working him. And, I think about that. Like, that's how I felt when he passed, had to be how Garrett's feeling right now, dad, just all that stuff. But I could ramble on for this stuff for hours, but I'm going to go ahead and probably cut it here. And, go watch some of these best moments of Greg Biffle. There's a pile of videos on him. And it's just, if you just look up, I bet you look up Greg Biffle best moments, you'll find 100 different videos people put together from early 2000s NASCAR racing to, sand rail stuff, side-by-side stuff, playing with his kids, fishing, paddle boating, just all sorts of crazy stuff he was always getting into. I couldn't imagine what wasn't on screen, A lot of people talked about how he wasn't a tech guy. He didn't know how to find a DM on Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And that just really, I don't know. It's crazy. Super crazy that we lost someone in this industry that I love so much. And, he's upstairs watching all the people do it now. He's in a better place, and just gotta live like Biff. But we'll call it that. Thanks. Subscribe. See you later.